Welcome to the Mrs. Papers. Today we're going to paint up some Stormcast Eternal Prosecutors for my Celestial Vindicators army. Hello and welcome back. Alright, so we're going to start with some Stynylrez Black Primer. It's from Badger. I like its self-leveling, and here are the sub-assemblies. Alright, now once you got that painted, what we're going to do is white from Vallejo model color through an airbrush. We're just misting on some of the, I had very high PSI, just misting on some of the edges of the wings. This is like a zenithal kind of base that you want to kind of get there. I wanted a bit odd, like a different color texture colors, so I wanted to go from white to black like that and have that transition going in. Remember, acrylic paints are translucent, so you're going to see some of the shadows still pop up out underneath, and that's exactly what I was going for, shadows underneath the wings, the top of the wings there. Alright, so next up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Sotek Green for the base layer. I'm going to start with a base layer, and this is mostly, it's not really very zenithal. This is a different way of painting than using the zenithal highlighting. It's just a little bit different. This is very watered down. You can see I'm putting a lot of multiple thin coats. Similarly, if you go to do this by brush, this is how you would do it, where you would put multiple thin coats kind of all over. Try not to get into the recesses too much. Using an airbrush makes this process a lot simpler. That means you're saving a lot of time in base coating that you would not normally if you had just a brush. So if you can, you really want to make your life easier if painting minis is what you want to do, by just investing into an airbrush. Alright, just trying to get the tips of that again with the Sotek Green. One of the things with these prosecutors is that you have to consider that the wings also have to be done this at the same time as doing the miniature itself. And I'm not used to painting wings. This is the first time I've ever tried these type of wings, and it was interesting. I tried to do it in sub-assembly like this. It was, after a while painting the wings with this sub-assembly specifically, I had to like remove it from the sub-assembly after a while because it just really, I couldn't get in there with a brush as I would like to. Again, this is all just for the base coat. You're just setting things up with nice little transitions, and you want that high contrast and really build it up. This is just all over. And as you can see, it's already starting to get into it, and since the top part was darker than the light part, you can see that transition there since it's translucent, and you can see that there's a variant or a gradient going on there. Alrighty, so next up, what we're going to do is going to use Temple Guard Blue, and Temple Guard Blue as a medium color there. So you have the dark color, Sotek Green. Temple Guard Blue is your medium color, and then you're going to go and build up that transition, that gradient into the highlights. You got the base coat with the highlights, and when I call base coat is that you have your base color as well as your highlights built in. So all you have to do is just grab the paintbrush after you're done, and you don't even have to use the airbrush for much anything else. Alright, so what you do to the body, you do to the wings itself. So I'm just going to get some highlights right there on the tip. I'm trying to bring those. At first, what I wanted to do is I want to leave the whole thing blue to see what kind of contrast it was. Later on, I decided to do gold Sigmar symbols on the wings. Thanks to a friend who looked at it and said, well, I think these are done. And I was like, well, you know, it just looks too bland on the wings. And I'm like, he's completely right. Don't ever be afraid to get, you know, some constructive criticism of your work. When I say criticism, I don't mean like bashing it down, but saying, hey, have you considered this? Or, hey, you know, something just seems not complete about this. Just like my friend Ian did. He's like, something doesn't seem complete about those wings. And he's like, maybe if you painted the Sigmar symbols. I'm like, you were so right. So always get that feedback. That's really important to grow as a painter, if is that what you want to do. I know I'm on a painting journey, so I'm constantly trying to grow as a painter, so I'm really trying to put forward an effort and making conscious changes to my painting style every time and every miniature. Alright, so next up, some Bootstrap leather from Formula P3. I really do love this paint as a base. I kind of use it for a lot of things. You can go darker, any brown would work, but this is just my personal preference. Actually, out of all the bottles of paint that I own, Bootstrap leather and Bone White are the two paints that I actually ran out of, and I had to buy more of those two paints because I completely ran out of it. And partially the Bootstrap leather, I have to say, went the road of the Citadel shades. That means I spilt it once. So yeah, that contributed to it, I gotta say, because the pots of P3 paint do last a lot longer than a lot of other paints that I've owned. I don't know, I think milliliter is more. I'm not even sure if there's more paint in P3 formula paint pots than other pots, but I think they're great. They have unique colors. I love using them, and really, truly wonderful to use P3 paints. I'm crazy about them. I use them through airbrush as well as through regular paintbrush. I'm not afraid to dilute. All right, so what we're doing, you got the base coat with that P3 brown leather, and all the gold areas, you would a base coat with that P3 brown. And it really just gives a rich texture to the gold, having that as the underlayer, and you can see the before and after right there. And you know, my friend Ian was completely right. I mean, look at the difference with the gold Sigmar symbols coming down. It really does have that contrast. It really pops like a spot color there. And that's what the gold is on Celestial Vindicators. I feel that it's more of a spot color more than just, or a trim color more than just the main color. The main color is that radiant blue. Conversely, if you wanted to bring up the contrast even more than I have here, I would integrate sky blue, and I use sky blue from a Vallejo model color. If you want to really make it, like, push it close to that white level of transition when it comes to your extreme highlights. But you know, for basics, this is more of a speed paint for me. It does its job. I think it's going to look great on the tabletop. I think it's going to look great 2 inches from your face as well. But no, I'm not going to try to win awards with these things. For my Celestial Vindicators army, I just really want, you know, a quick army that I could put together and, you know, make it look great and not enter any kind of painting competition with them. Although some people say, hey, you could just enter all your stuff. And I'm like, I don't know about that. All right, so painting the gold, you can see I had to take these wings off their pill bottles in order to reach them. Okay, next up, all the parchment areas I also painted with brown, the Bootstrap leather brown. But now what we're going to do is we're going to pick out all the rivets that are on there, and you need to do this. This is a vital step. People look for details when they pick up the miniature and they're going to put it close to their face. They want to see these miniatures, and this is what makes it really and truly stand out. Okay. You really want your miniature to stand out, you have to pick out these rivets. Now, you don't have to use the tip of the brush. What I'm doing is using the side of the brush. You can see there, using the side of the brush to get just the tips of the rivet. And you don't have to dip your paintbrush completely into the paint, just the tip of the paintbrush right there. Some flow improver does help a little bit, but there you go. So next up, what we're going to do is use some Bone White, and we're going to use that on the parchment pieces themselves. And I do like using Bone White for parchment pieces, like warm white, as to contrast with the beautiful greenish blues that we've been using for the Celestial Vindicators army. My wife tells me I paint everything blue. That's my favorite painting color. But I'm gonna have to branch out and do some other things. But right now, you know, it seemed teal to me and not really blue. It's more on the green spectrum. I'm trying to get out of that, but I think it looks wonderful. I really was drawn to it. Plus the lore, oh my gosh, the lore of Celestial Vindicators, you know, they remind me of Ghost Rider from the comic books, where it's just all about that vengeance, you know, spirit of vengeance. Oh man, I used to collect those. Now I can actually play with things like that. See, I get to play with them, not just read about them. All right, build them up in thin coats with that bone white until you get a nice variant. Now, I did start some of the bone white around the edges of the parchment, but I'm not going to do the entire thing with the brush, so I'm going to come back to that. But once you have your bone white out, time to scratch up leather pieces. Yes, put some bone white and do like little lines or hashes on your leather pieces is a simple way to show a little bit of weathering. Of course, you can take this to the nth level by adding different color hashes so you have a variation of color. But if you're just doing a speed paint and you just really want to add that detail really quick, this is an easy way to add scratches to your leather armor and really make it look realistic. But you can't just end it there. So once you do the hash marks, we're going to put a wash on top of it just to even out the colors so it could really show through that it's worn. Yeah. And you don't want to, if you're going to do this via leather, and I chose leather for those, I don't know what that's called, those pieces guarding his loin. Don't forget about the belts and all the straps as well. You want to go really around the miniature and get those hashes. But you see the hashes, they're crosses. They're going every which way. You may want to tell a story with them. Like, think about if the sword hit it or if he's sitting down where the crease might be. But if you don't want to put that much thought into it, you don't really have to. You can just have some fun with it, paint some happy little scratches, and then you're just fine, you know. I don't beat myself up over a lot of these things. I just try to add the detail where I see, and I get inspired. It's like, ooh, I should put hashes on there. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Make it happen, right? Again, going the belt, you want to be delicate with this. I'm using a 0 brush for this. That's a nylon one, but you can use a fancier brush to it as well. It's up to you, really. Those high-end brushes, Winsor & Newton Series 7 is what I'm talking about. They hold paint a lot better. They really do, right into that belly. And it is a worthy investment. I think there were $15, $13 to get yourself a set, to get yourself one brush. So it is on a little expensive range, but the mileage you get out of those brushes are so worth it. Again, this is not that, but I want to go through all my other brushes before I get into my Winsor & Newtons, which I've had for 3 years and I've never used yet. But I will one day. I don't know when that day will be, but I will. Okay, possibly when I have to do edge highlighting for my Tau army when I built that. All right, so this is coming out. I mean, it's really coming out great, and these little details do pay off in the end. So it's worth taking your time at this part and adding those details and adding those scratches to all the leather parts, because it really is going to make a subtle and immense impact when you're done. So really important you go that. And you can see the base coating really pop through with the gradient of colors right there. I really like the way that came out. Alrighty, so next up, what we're going to do is we're going to put Agrax Earthshade onto the leather itself. The reason why I'm choosing Agrax Earthshade and not Seraphim, Sepia, or something else is because when I shade down all the parchment pieces, try to get those letters of Sigmar to show up in the parchment pieces, I'm actually going to use Seraphim Sepia. So I wanted to do something different for excuse me. I wanted to do something different for the leather itself so it could have differentiation. I don't want it to be, so you can see like a different kind of material. And that's one thing you really want to do. You want to actually create some kind of different textures with your models to differentiate them. So adding a different color is actually adding a different kind of texture to that, even though they're painted similarly. All right, time to show you some masking. I mask with silly putty. I've done this with other shows, other tutorials as well, but never for Celestial Vindicators or Stormcast, so I just want to show you how I do it. So you take the silly putty, you take some clay shapers, there's some rubber silicone kind of tips right there, and those really help. I love those, and you can get them on Amazon really quickly. Silicone clay shapers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten this out and try to pull it apart there. Try to flatten it out some more. I've used this silly putty for 3 years now, and I've painted and masked it and painted and masked it, and it's still going strong for the 99 cents that I paid for it. Really worthy investment. You're gonna see how I do, how I just lean these up and I just like line it up, and I'm just pressing it with my hand at the moment, just to get in the general shape of where I want it to mask off. Right, really important that you get the general and then go to specific, and that goes with anything in art. You want to get the general design and then go to the specifics. Now with the clay shapers, you can see me mold into the lines and the recesses to really get an accurate cutoff line, or as close to it as I possibly can, to actually cut off one area from the other. And the reason why I do that is because I really I try to get as close as possible, because you can always clean up what you missed with a brush. That is not even an issue. So, but if you can get it as close as possible, and you're gonna shoot with the airbrush and go over that area, then you want to get as close as possible. So those clay shapers really do come in clutch and save the day when it comes to masking and helping you mask off an area with silly putty. And actually, it's not that hard to do. I started doing this technique when I did my hex wraiths that I built up, and that was earlier when I first started a channel over a year ago. I put on some hex wraiths and actually tried to use liquid mask in order to do the hex wraiths, and it came out terribly. I've been still trying to use or find methodologies in using liquid mask and how it would be if I use liquid mask effectively, and I'm still trying to use that effectively for something. I'm trying to do it for weathering. Maybe I can try some more with weathering. I just have a bottle and I kind of want to just use it up for something, right? So I'm experimenting with that. So I'm definitely trying, and it's so do not use liquid mask when you're trying to do something like this, where it has a lot of crevices where it can get into. I would only recommend using that technique or using that product when you have flat surfaces. Right now, the silly putty's really coming in clutch here. It's really helping us out, especially with the masking, because silly putty in itself, you can paint on it, and all you have to do is put it, like rip it off and stretch it out a little bit, and then put it back into the little egg container you got there, and you could reuse it and reuse it and reuse it and reuse it, and it can fit on there any surface you got for a miniature. So it's really great how it just completely covers everything. Now I'm being really cautious. I'm going to cover as much as I possibly can of the miniature. You don't have to. If you have control of an airbrush, you can just mask off the area that you think might get painted and call it. But sometimes there are areas you don't notice that you get your you kind of get your airbrush in and you don't realize that you have the overspray on the other side. So just be mindful of where you're putting your masking, because or be on the safe side when it comes to putting the masking in, because you really don't want to have an errant spray go across your miniature and then just really start over again, or be on damage control, but as long as you're cautious and keep in mind, or be on the safe side and cover all of it, you can, but I find I don't need to as much, but I really just make sure that I'll try to look at the item from all the angles, just like I'm doing right there, and make sure that the spray paint won't get onto it. See, I left the head open, so there's that. You're gonna see just slightly going, and anytime I do anything close to white, I like to do it via airbrush, only because I like to have it. It's just, for me, I have difficulty painting white, and I'd much rather just airbrush it. It comes out so much smoother when I do that. Again, I did pre-paint the edges, and you gotta see how it just blends right in. Look at that, there you go. That little top layer of airbrushing really blends it all together. I love using airbrush as a tool, as it was meant for miniature painting, and I encourage you that if you do not have an airbrush, yes, it's a worthy investment to get one. So, and the holiday season's upon us, so yeah, I would ask for an airbrush. That and the Battlefield boxes for I mean, those are amazing from GW. Alrighty, so next up, what we're going to do is some Seraphim Sepia. I'm just adding some shadows in from the bottom, hitting it with airbrush. A lot of people don't realize that I use airbrush with shades, and it has a different effect. I can just like put a gradients with it. I love the way, see how it just looks burnt? I love it. And I'm just playing around with this. This is a step that's not really necessary because I'm going to go back with the brush and do it again. I just wanted to add some more shadow right there, only because he was close to the miniature. Okay, so after that, what I do is some bone white, and I'm just going to pick out. You never just end in a shade and call it a day. You want to highlight it. And so I'm just going to highlight the raised areas with some bone white. It's diluted, and it has some flow improver in there, just so it can just, you know, flow right off the brush. You don't want too much. Be very careful. You don't want it to flow out of control. So you always wick off the paint on something. I wick it off right there on my desk because I have a lot of desk area there covered in newspaper, and I can wick that off as well. But I have a tendency, I mean, after a while of painting this way, you kind of know how much goes on. You can feel it. It's weird. I can't really explain it, but it takes time. It takes time. It took a lot of miniatures in order for me to get to the stage where I can actually know how much paint I can use for a certain area without it running. And every now and again I do make mistakes, but that's okay. You know, I just, you know, go along and enjoy the process. And really enjoy the process. If this hobby is frustrating for you, then maybe this is not your hobby, I have to say. Because maybe you're overthinking it. Maybe you're overdoing it. I've met some people who are so methodical. They're like, well, we need to mix ratios of drops of paint to water to flow improver to this and follow the recommendation and the guidelines. I don't paint like that. This is very, I guess, right-brained. I guess that's where your art side is, right? So it's like, I'll just throw it on together and see what happens. I just have fun with it, whatever, you know. It's sort of like me cooking. I just throw things in a pot and see what happens, right? If I like a flavor, I throw it in there and it's like, hey, this could use a little this. So very rarely do I follow recipes. My wife does, though. My wife is an amazing cook, and she follows recipes like I should sometimes. But nope, no recipes for me. Alright, here you go. Now I'm going to go for some Mephiston red, and I'm just going to do the actual handle. And you can do this in leather. I chose red only because the model's mainly cool and blue, and I just want that contrast color to pop it. Kind of like the way it looks on the box too. So I wanted to go for something similar to that, not exactly that. So I'm just going to go and hit with Mephiston red. Sorry, it was out of camera there. I'm going to try to bring that back in. But you get the idea where I'm just actually hitting that handle with Mephiston red, and hopefully I can get my act together. There he is. There you go. Sorry about that. And just trying to get in there and be very careful not to get it on the blue parts. That if you do, you can quickly go in with another brush and, you know, dilute it with a little bit of water. And you got to be quick at it. You can't let that. It's the thing about acrylic paints, they dry really quick, which is great when you want things to dry, but it's really bad when you make a mistake. That's why when you use oil paints, it's kind of easier because you could just take your time and work on blending till, you know, the sun sets. It doesn't matter. You can go back and forth until you get a gradient. But with acrylic paint, you got to work quick. So if you do make an errant mistake, you can erase it, but you got to go really quickly. So have a brush on hand ready to go. So this way you can void out any of the mistakes that you may have. Alright, so next up, what we're going to do is we're going to do some Kador Red Highlight from Formula P3. I just picked up this Kador Red Highlight because I picked up the Kador set from P3. And I just really like the vibrant orange that it gives. Normally, I do Wild Rider Red for an orange, but this one is a lot more brighter. I kind of like it, so that's why I did for a highlight on this one. And what I'm doing is just doing the cross hatches and trying to really bring it up. And the reason why I'm going to and I'm bringing it up really high because I'm going to shade it back down, so I don't mind that it's super bright and highly contrasting right there. And it's something you want to do. You really want to edge highlights to small bits because it really makes the weapon come alive. It really has that grand design going on. And it's really special when the weapon, you lavish so much detail on it that it really makes your eye focus on it. So whatever you're lavishing a lot of detail on, your eye kind of focus. When you are painting, you're actually telling a story. You're telling the person, well, this person is this model, his leather is worn, and you've seen the hard road. If you have dusty feet, where was he traveling? Or if you have mucky feet, maybe through a bog or a swamp, you're actually telling a story with your painting. So I think that's fascinating, and I love the fact that you can actually do that. You can tell the story, have a narrative in your painting. With this one, nice shiny weapons, ready for battle, just got reforged, ready to take vengeance on those that committed atrocious crimes like chaos and chaos spawn, and kind of eliminate that. So yeah, I'm trying to tell a story with mine, although the leather is worn. So that was a reflection of me that their soul has been reforged, therefore their soul is worn as well, and I wanted to give that impression when I did these models. So all my leather I try to really weather down, or at least have some kind of scratches and nicks to show that they've been in battle at the very least, but they were newly reforged in my mind when it comes to this. Every now and again, one of these models, I'll just throw in some splashes of blood in there because Vindicators, hey. All right, some Carroburg Crimson now. Just going to shade down the weapon. Again, be very careful not to hit the blue. It looks like I'm going very quickly here, but I've been doing this for a while, so I guess my brush control is there. I built that up after several years of doing this, so, you know, just take your time. Take your time. For the purposes of the video, though, I kind of wanted to go quick and not really have to look at that for a very long time. Okay, so I assembled the pieces together. There it is. Looking great, but I want to add some more detail to it, so we are not done, but it's looking great. All right, so next what I'm going to do is I have a Micron pen, if you can see right there. I love Micron, 0.005, very fine tip there. You got to be careful with these inks because they bleed out on you if you're not quick, but this is a really cool way to put like this little edge highlight, and I really wanted to just take my time and go around really carefully, just like that. And just do the rims of that, really make it pop out, you know, really get that recess. And I think it looks great. Now you can do this with a brush if you want to. I chose not to, just because of personal preference, but I really like Micron pens for a lot of little detail work that I do. And I have fun with it, and it comes out with a great effect. Again, not going for awards here. I'm going for a great tabletop version of the models and really painting them up to a good standard on a table. To me, this is tabletop. Other people beg to differ and they're like, oh my gosh, there's no way that's tabletop. And I'm like, yeah, that is for me. Only because my first tabletop was burnt. I burnt it in a fire because it was so horrible that no eye should see that. Sort of like looking straight at Cthulhu. You go crazy. So I wanted not to get that in. I wanted not to have my army look like the first miniature I paint. But the good news here is that you get better with time, like everything else. You have to put the hours in, you have to put the practice in. The more you do something, the better you get at it. So I'm just getting I'm getting better with my tabletop quality, honestly. And I really like it. So here's two. I did both of them. I don't like doing the exact same miniature, but this is the way it came in the box set. So I'm just gonna go for it. And they made this box set into a start collecting box set, which is really cool actually. So it's like I'm doing a start collecting box right there, and starting out with Stormcast Eternals. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I like what they did there. Now I took Green Stuff's World rolling pin, and I took some green stuff and I rolled out this texture for the floor, and then I took another one and kind of put it and leveled it and made a base. But this is one important thing. You can take some poster tack and you gotta put it where your foot's gonna go, or where the actually it's connecting with the base. This way you don't paint on that and it could be a plastic to green stuff connection. So we have Citadel, the vines, the skulls. We're gonna add some blood warrior bits to these because they're always fighting Khorne. So hey, there you go, Khornite bits. Alright, so now I have the bits on there, multi-leveled. I use Stynylrez black primer to get that out of the way. I'm going to show you how I do the base, and it's pretty quick. all the accoutrements on there, starting with the base color of rock. I really do like that from Badger Minitaire. And it's just pretty much a light coating. You don't really want to get into all the cracks and crevices. You don't want to build up any kind of pooling. You're just trying to give it a light. You want to retain some of the blackness in there, so you have some shadows in there. Again, contrast is the name of the game when doing bases, because you do notice faces, bases, and banners really, really important. Remember, you're not saturating completely. You're leaving some of the black in there. You do want some coverage as well. So there you go. Nice dusting, almost like a zenithal highlighting, coming in from the top, going straight across. And it's not that hard to do. Just look how easy it is to do. And you're creating values. You're creating values of dark and light just by doing it. And I'm doing it in more than one coat, so I'm just going to get some spot highlights right here and there where I really want to cover. Mainly, I want to get that grass areas over there. I kind of want to really accentuate the areas on the side there as well. And like underneath the axe and stuff like that, it's going to be black. So, you know, you do have some shadows that are naturally created when you do this process. And look how quickly I do it. I mean, you're seeing from start to finish. I'm not even pausing the camera here. You can see exactly how it is that I get this done. And there you go. Very, very easy to base coat this. Alrighty, so now that we have that, you see some of the shadows poking through. You got Drakenhof Nightshade. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace in the lines. This particular mold for the rolling pin has like big gaps between the rocks. So I really want to add the value of shadow between those, or at least the grout as a different color. Sometimes grout is supposed to be lighter than the actual rocks. I didn't want that. I wanted to actually do like I do panel lining, panel lining for 40k vehicles or something like that. Gonna add some water to this Drakenhof Nightshade just to get it to flow just a little bit. And I am going to town. I am going to town right there. You can panel line it. I panel lined it, or you can go to town like this. Again, experimenting. I experiment with my with all my miniatures. Every miniature I do, I try to do something a little different. Maybe it works better, maybe it works worse. It doesn't matter, because it's all a learning process. So just really going to town with this and shading it in. Not covering any of the accoutrement, just the flagstone. Because what we're going to do is we're going to bring all that stuff back up. Since we have so much going on in this base, I was going to just do the panel lines, but I decided not to because you really couldn't get underneath stuff. But this was the quick and dirty way to do it. And that's fine. You could get quick, dirty, and messy. Next up, I'm going to start painting the leaves and green. And I use quite a few colors to get all the leaves, so I just want to share that with you. So the leaves there, I use Escorpina Green, which I'm using right now from Vallejo Metal game color. And then I use Mephiston Red for the red ones from Citadel as a base color. And then I use Goblin Green for the vines and everything else, and some of the actual leaves, and olive drabs just to reinforce the darkness of the vines themselves. And those are the colors that I use for the green foliage. And it's really simple to do. You can use any color you want. You don't have to follow this pattern at all. It's just something that I use. Sometimes I use P3 orange as well. Just play around with the variation of it. And that's the colors that I wanted. Alrighty, now with all the leaves done, and you see it's really starting to come to life. I'm going to take Badger Fur from Badger Minitaire, and I'm just hitting the center of each stone. And you're going to watch and see how this really does transform. I lowered down the PSI so I can just really get a lot of control with that. Unfortunately, that means a lot of dry tip. If you have an airbrush, the tip dries out. If you do have an airbrush, it's not wizardry in a bottle. You do have to have control, but you're gonna see how this really picks up, and really, you know, the contrast just jumps right off the video, and it really drops off in person and really shines through. See where it says strength right there? I'm trying to get that really done well as well. And remember, there goes the dry tip. That happens. Now you do have to stop your work and get your dry tip dry. I've used a toothbrush with water down to get in there. I used tissue as well, but as long as you knew that the tip is dry, I mean, the tip is functioning properly. If it gets really dry, it gets some spattering effect, which will ruin everything. So be very careful. But once I'm bringing these flagstones up, bring them up individually wherever you can. really do see that come to life. Look at that. I'm really happy at how it really just jumps up at you. And just that Badger Fur Rock combination with Badger Minitaire. Badger Minitaire paints the first miniature paints that I've ever bought via airbrush. They're airbrush ready. I don't like to brush with them. I don't like to put brush on them for some reason. It just doesn't work out well. But through an airbrush, they're pretty decent. And there are by far the most paint I've experienced that you can get from miniature paints. The bottles are huge. You know, about twice as much, if not even more. There you go. I'm using that toothbrush again to get the tip clean, and it really works well. Look at that contrast. Like really, it really does pop. You don't want to cover any of the leaves that you painted, so be very careful with that. But if you do, you can always just go over it. It's not really that detrimental, but still, you don't want to redo work, especially when you want to speed paint. I'm doing all the accoutrement from the Khorne Bloodbound army as if it were statues that broke. That was my theme, because some of the miniatures from Shadespire have those broken monuments. So that's what I did there. All right, time for some Athonian Camoshade, from Athonian Camoshade. And what we're going to do is just going to paint in the green areas. And I really like that because it really looks like a dark green or a dark grass, dark foliage. And really, really pops it up. Again, painting with shades via airbrush. And I love doing it. I love tinting things like that, bringing them up slowly. Now, you have to be careful. You're putting them on in layers and letting them dry, so this way it looks like a little dust coating. And plus, I'm going to go around the edges as well, just to make sure that the green foliage is that green foliage, and it really, really pops. And it really makes that come alive, because there it is, with all the little accoutrement in there, all the different colors mainly. And you do want your bases to pop, because in an army, you notice those faces, you notice those bases, and any kind of banners and heraldry. These are the things where the eyes are drawn to, so you really want to knock it out of the park when it comes to these bases. All right, I painted the skull on there, bone white, and now I'm going to do is I'm going to shade them in with a brush, that little skull there. With the Seraphim Sepia, just to really bring it out and make it look kind of cool, in my opinion. It really does a good job of doing that. Seraphim Sepia. Remember to take off the excess, and it comes in, and I'm not going crazy with it. I don't think it's looking good right there. And we're almost done. Well, we're going to go into the last step in which I do there, which is going to be the rim of the base, in which I do like to paint rotten wood from Badger Minitaire, and that's the color that I paint my rim of the base. I always like to paint the rims of my bases a color, just to separate the actual world that the miniature lives in from the rest of the world outside. Is a clear division. And with these, I just wanted to go that almost studio-like rim for bases, but I don't want to really do the studio rim for bases. I kind of want Badger Minitaire because I want to use them up. But at the same time, I do somewhat regret using the Badger Minitaire because I can't really brush it on effectively. I mean, you can. It's a royal pain in the tuchus. Not really conducive. But you see that I'm not masking anything. And that just comes with a lot of time and hand control with the brush to be able to do that and not have too much overspray and tilting it on the right angle, so when it does spray out, it won't spray all over the place. And if you get some overspray, it's not really a big deal. Honestly, it looks kind of cool. Yep, because nature is not always that clean. Well, this is pretty much the last step for these prosecutors. I really hope that you enjoy. And let's take a look at some pictures, and I'll catch you on the outro.
So those prosecutors are done and they're ready for the gaming table. Well, if you like this video, like, share, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on the Miniatures Paintbrush.